I want to talk about Philly. You called the Knicks Sixers game yesterday. Philly's won 8 in a row. Um, I wanted to ask your just initial thoughts being there, calling the game, and I guess a takeaway, which I don't think is based just off of yesterday, but based really off of this win streak overall, is the Sixers need to shoot more threes because it kind of like it allows James to look like James. Like the end of the game yesterday, that started to look like James at his best. They're 10th in 3-pointers made right now, but I'm curious about your thoughts yesterday overall. Obviously, Joel has been incredible. We've talked a ton about that, but where the rest of that team is, because it does feel like they're starting to come into their own, and they're getting healthy and everything's seeming to click.
Yeah, first of all, it was a real thrill to call a Christmas Day game, the noon game in the Garden. That's a game that I actually played in my first year in Philly. Philly at New York, 12 o'clock Christmas Day. So it was really fun for me to call the game, and always fun to call Philly games, really. It's always fun to call Philly games. I think Philly's really good, and I'll start by saying I still believe there's 2 tiers of Eastern Conference contenders. I think the first tier is the Bucks and the Celtics, and I think the second tier is the Cavs, the Nets, and the Sixers. And I don't see any other teams that could potentially move into that second tier. So I think the separation is greater between tier 2 and tier 3 than it is between tier 1 and tier 2, because those 3 teams I mentioned, the Cavs, the Nets, and the Sixers, are all really good. And I mentioned this on the broadcast, but I think some perspective of this Philly season is necessary. So when they started the season, slow start, a lot of numbers about James Harden dribbling the basketball, his sort of desire to return to prominence and show everybody that he is the James Harden of old. And then we get some injuries. Joel's body language early in the season wasn't great. Maxi's out. He's missed about half the games. Harden's missed half the games. They win some without any of those guys in the lineup, with Embiid missing 8 games as well. And then Embiid comes back and he sort of keeps them afloat with these incredibly dominant performances that we have talked about numerous times on both this show and the Old Man and the Three. And so you get to Christmas Day, you get to one of the markers of the NBA season. Maybe Christmas Day, All-Star break, end of regular season, if we were to divide into sort of 3 significant events of the regular season. And you're looking at Philly, and they're in the hunt for the 1 seed. Despite all of that, Joel is having another MVP season. And since James Harden has returned from injury, he's playing like an all-NBA point guard, really smartly balancing when to shoot, when to be aggressive, when to facilitate. And I can't help but be really bullish on this team.
Yeah. Well, so I think 2 guys that we should shout out, who've been great for them, or good yesterday, and really have been great for the last couple of months, are Tobias Harris and DeAnthony Melton. Obviously, our boy George went off yesterday, but I feel like Tobias and DeAnthony have been a big reason why they've been able to go on this run. My question for you is about them offensively, because defensively now, I believe they're second in defensive rating.
Yeah, they've been second. They've been top 5
Yeah.
for a number of weeks now.
They're second in defensive rating, but they're 13th in offense. They're 4th since James has come back. So there's a clear uptick there. How do they get better? How do they get into the top 10 offensively? Because it does feel like if you've been in the top 5 defensively all year, if you can get that offense up to a top 5, top 6 offense, this is potentially a 1 seed in the East.
Yeah, I like your comment about 3-point shooting. DeAnthony Melton, since Harden has come back, has shot the shit out of the ball, shot it great yesterday. I love him on both ends of the floor. You mentioned Tobias. I spoke with Doc before the game, and he said Tobias has been solid, and he's bought into this role. Every player, I'm sure Tobias is this way too. Every player that's that borderline, maybe an all-star in the right season, wants to get that recognition. And, oscillating between being second option, third option, fourth option, third option, fourth option, second option, fourth option. He has to do that in real time throughout a season, year to year. And he's just bought into whatever's asked of him this season. He's been great for them. And I think to get into the top 10, they just need to keep playing how they're playing. And certainly if George Niang can normalize his 3-point shooting and get back to high 30s, DeAnthony Melton continues to shoot the ball well. He doesn't have to shoot 45% like he's done over the last 8 or 9 games, but they've got to knock down threes. But one of my hits I just did on First Take was which team is the biggest threat to the Nets and the Celtics and the Bucks. And I think you can make an argument for all 3 of the other teams I mentioned. I really think they're all really fantastic basketball teams. Cleveland has the best defense in the league. They've got the second best net rating. We talked about Philly with Brooklyn. They're 19-6 since Jacques Vaughn took over. They're up to, I believe, 11th in defense. They're a top 5 offense. They've been 8th in defense since Jacques Vaughn took over. So, like, what felt early in the season like a runaway Eastern Conference between the 2 best teams, all of a sudden we have 3 other really good basketball teams to talk about and watch and observe how well they're playing.
Yeah, and I don't want to turn this into an MVP conversation, but I think you can make if I think we could both agree Tatum is probably still in that conversation for front runner right now. But it's like if you have Tatum there and then you have Giannis there, I think Joel and I think KD is sneaking himself into that conversation as well as another guy who is like in the hunt. And so we're talking about
anyone else, Tommy?
A guy that we're going to talk about probably in the next 30 seconds who plays in Denver, I feel like would be the last person in that conversation. But I think in the East, it's like if you have an MVP candidate on your team, your role and the guys around them are sort of know their role and are playing their role. I think that you're gonna find yourself in a pretty good spot.
The full episode of The Old Man and the Three Things is available exclusively on Amazon Music.